Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon, the authorities have surrounded a conscript sergeant who has been on the run since killing 5 fellow soldiers at an army outpost near the border with North Korea. After a 4-2 loss to Algeria in their second World Cup game, Korea need to beat Belgium in their final group game to have any chance of qualifying for the next round. Plus, Seoul's foreign ministry will summon the Japanese ambassador to Korea to protest at the Abe administration's move to whitewash its landmark apology for wartime sexual slavery. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
It's noon Monday, June 23rd here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in live from Seoul. I'm Ojin Ju.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story at this lunchtime, a conscript soldier who killed 5 of his comrades this past weekend remains holed up in a forest near the inter-Korean border, but he is surrounded by authorities.
Officials at the Defense Ministry say it's just a matter of time before the 22-year-old surrenders, and authorities plan to capture him alive so they can find out what made him go on the rampage. Ji-yeon reports.
A conscript soldier who killed 5 comrades in a grenade and gun attack over the weekend is on the verge of surrendering, according to the Defense Ministry, which says its first priority is to capture the soldier alive. Authorities successfully made contact with a 22-year-old fugitive soldier at around 8 a.m. this morning and tossed him a cell phone after he asked to talk with his father. The parents are reportedly trying to persuade their son to surrender peacefully. The fugitive soldier, identified only by his surname name, is currently hiding near a school some 10 kilometers from the military base, where he opened fire on troops over the weekend. He fled to the area before being cornered by the military, and the two sides exchanged fire, injuring one. The area is under lockdown and nearby residents have been evacuated. The motive for the initial shooting remains unknown, but Army sources say Im's actions were likely premeditated and targeted specific individuals. Then fired off 10 rounds and threw a grenade in the attack, leaving behind 5 dead and 8 others injured. Lin was on the list of soldiers that needed special attention as he struggled adapting to military life. He had just 3 months left before he was scheduled to be discharged. The attack is the latest in a series carried out by Korean soldiers. 8 were killed back in 2005 after a soldier went rogue at his military base, and a similar incident on Gangwon Island in 2011 left 4 dead. Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Turning now to our ongoing coverage of the 2014 Brazil World Cup. And despite many fans here in Korea waking up very early in the morning to watch the Korea-Algeria match, it didn't turn out too well because South Korea collapsed in the first half, really, down 3-0, and then eventually they lost 4-2.
It was a very disappointing morning, and to get the highlights between the two nations, we connect live to our SJ Lee standing by. SJ, give us the latest.
Now, good afternoon, guys. Now, just like you said, the fans had high expectation for the team going into this match, but unfortunately, their defense looked terrible in the first half. Now, Korea looking shaky from the start here, actually, as the Ji-yeon offense played aggressively from the start. In the 26th minute, they finally find one back in the net as Islam Slimani scores off of a long pass, giving Algeria the 1-0 lead. But just 2 minutes later, the Korean defense collapses once again, giving up the second goal on a corner as Algeria goes up 2-0 early on. But the defense continues to struggle as Korea goes down 3-0 at the half. Now, Son Heung-min would add a goal here in the 50th minute, but that goes to waste as Korea quickly gives up another goal. Now, Koo Ja-chul would add the second Korean goal, but Algeria takes this match 4-2. Now, thousands of fans lined the streets to cheer for the Korean team despite their loss to Algeria. Now, it isn't all doom and gloom, however, as fans still have high hopes for the squad can reach the last 16. Connie Kim reports.
Disappointment was written across the faces of the tens of thousands of fans who braved the weather to cheer on Korea in their second World Cup group game against Algeria. Despite the heavy rain last night, nearly 40,000 people gathered in front of COEX, one of the biggest cheering spots in downtown Seoul, to support the Red Devils. Live music performances meant the atmosphere was festive before the match. The happy mood and optimism soon turned to disappointment, however, as Algeria stuck 3 goals past Korea in the first half.
Although Team Korea's first victory didn't come in the match against Algeria on this Monday morning, hopes are high that their win will come in their match against Belgium on Friday morning.
Today's game was a turning point to make it further in the tournament. I thank Son Heung-min and Koo Ja-chul for scoring a goal each. Although we lost today, I support our team and believe we can do well in our next match.
If we play like we did during the second half of this game, I think we have a good chance of beating Belgium on Friday.
The fans said the team's poor defending in the first half cost them in the end.
Our attacking play was pretty good, but we were vulnerable to counterattacks. You never know what can happen in football. I believe we can win against Belgium and qualify for the last 16.
On the day of the big match against Belgium on Friday, the cheers will be heard all the way to Brazil. Fans across the country refuse to give up hope that Korea can go at least one stage further in the World Cup. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And now moving on to other World Cup action from today, starting off with Belgium and Russia facing off this match. Of course, a big match, especially since Korea will be facing off against Belgium next. So let's take a look at the highlights. Now, Belgium already with 3 points and Russia needing a win in this match, but both sides are evenly matched throughout the first half. In fact, the match was a 0-0 draw up until the 88th minute when Divock Origi, who came off the bench, sends one past the goalkeeper, giving Belgium the 1-0 win. Now, with 6 points in Group H, Belgium advances to the next round. Meanwhile, another big match here, Portugal and the U.S. squaring off in Group G. It's Nani in the 5th minute of the match who sneaks one past the goalkeeper for an early 1-0 lead. But here's where it gets interesting. U.S. up 2-1 thanks to Clint Dempsey in the 81st, but literally just seconds before the whistle blows, Sylvester Valletta in the 90+5 minutes levels the match as both teams split a point each. And now finishing things off, let's take a look at the results from the previous day with some interesting results in Brazil. Now, first off, taking a look here, Argentina squaring off with Iran looked to be a shocking 0-0 draw, but what do you know? Leo Messi to the rescue in the 90+ minute, scores a brilliant goal, giving Argentina the 1-0 win. Meanwhile, Germany and Ghana facing off, and all the scores being scored in the second half. Ghana surprises everyone with a 2-2 draw. But for Miroslav Klose, who scored in the match, ties the World Cup goal scoring record of 15. And lastly, Nigeria taking on Bosnia-Herzegovina, a bit of a controversial match here, but Nigeria pulls away with the only goal of the match in the 29th minute as Algeria wins this one 1-0. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
And in other news, following Japan's release of a review of its landmark apology on wartime sexual enslavement, the Korean government is set to summon the Japanese ambassador this afternoon. Seoul is expected to lodge a formal complaint over Tokyo's latest move, but furthermore, it plans to take up the issue on the international stage. Arirang News' Hwang Jie tells us more.
With the relationship between Korea and Japan growing increasingly frosty over historical issues, Seoul will summon the Japanese ambassador on Monday. It comes in response to Tokyo's announcement last week of its re-examination into the Kuno statement. The Abe administration, while upholding the statement, controversially claimed that the Korean government was in close consultation with Japan when the statement was being drawn up.
The Kono statement was issued back in 1993 by then-Chief Cabinet Secretary Yohei Kono. It acknowledged for the first time the forced sexual enslavement of some 200,000 women by the Japanese military during the Second World War. In addition to calling in Japanese Ambassador Koro Pesho to complain about the move out of Tokyo, the Korean government plans to register historical records regarding the so-called comfort women with UNESCO and bring up the issue during United Nations meetings. Korea's foreign ministry made a tentative conclusion on Sunday that the Japanese review was trying to diminish the testimonies of sexual slavery victims and the apologetic tone of the Kono statement. Hwang Ji, Arirang News.
The troubled U.S. Homeland Missile Defense Program, heavily criticized for its unreliability, has finally carried out a successful test. The system, deployed 10 years ago by former President George W. Bush, is supposed to counter the long-range missile threat posed by North Korea. Shin Se-min has more.
The U.S. missile defense system on Sunday struck down a simulated enemy missile over the Pacific in the first successful intercept test of the program since 2008. This will help validate the troubled Boeing-run ground-based mid-course defense system, which provides the sole U.S. defense against long-range ballistic missiles. Missile Defense Agency Director Vice Admiral James Saring called it a very important step in Washington's continuing efforts to improve and increase the reliability of the defense system. The Pentagon also said all components involved in the test performed as planned, and the officials will be assessing the performance of the system with the data collected from the test. The system had failed to hit dummy missiles in previous tests since the Bush administration deployed the system in 2004 to counter the threat posed by North Korea. It was reported on Friday that the Pentagon had restructured its contract with Boeing to put more emphasis on maintenance and reliability. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, strategic patience is a key U.S. policy on North Korea. But while Washington patiently waits for the North to show some sincerity about denuclearizing, the North Korean regime is engaging in some diplomacy of its own, cozying up in recent weeks and months with Japan and Russia. So should the U.S. government take a fresh approach on Pyongyang? Our Hwang Sung-hee posed that question to Frank Januzzi, who worked as Asia policy advisor for the Obama campaign back in 2008 and is now serving as president of the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Foundation.
The most important thing is that North Korea continues to develop their nuclear capacity, and as long as the United States remains sidelined, I see no likelihood that that's going to change. Maybe putting people ahead of plutonium, focusing on some of the people-to-people interactions, which could address some of the pressing human rights concerns in North Korea, but also perhaps begin to create some greater enthusiasm inside North Korea among the elite for renegotiating the terms of their current path, their current commitment to nuclear weapons.
You just mentioned people over plutonium approach. What do you mean exactly by that?
So I think the United States and other parties to the six-party talks need to focus on building a constituency inside North Korea for change. It means even if you keep sanctions, doing things like family reunification visits, cultural exchanges, bringing North Korean students out of North Korea, all of these things can help show North Korea that the true path to security does not lie with nuclear weapons.
Really knowing that there is this huge nuclear threat in North Korea and just using the people-to-people approach, wouldn't that be too dangerous?
Well, the situation is dangerous now, and nothing that the six parties are doing is making it any less dangerous. So, admittedly, a people-focused approach will not yield immediate results on the nuclear threat that we face, but neither is the current strategic patience approach yielding anything in terms of a reduction of the threat.
President Xi Jinping will be coming to South Korea next month. Traditionally, Chinese leaders have visited North Korea before coming to South Korea. President Xi isn't doing that. Is this another sign of change in China-North Korea relations?
It's a very important signal by China that China sees the long-term future of the Korean Peninsula being decided more by Seoul than by Pyongyang. And China wants to have that discussion ultimately with South Korea. So I think it's a very good sign for China's recognition of the realities on the Korean Peninsula.
And that was our Hwang Sang-hee interviewing Frank Januzzi, a US expert on North Korea. Now, the OECD sees positive things in the coming months for the South Korean economy. The organisation puts Korea's composite leading indicator of economic activity, or CLI, at 101.01 in April. It marks the 15th straight month that the index topped the benchmark 100. The CLI provides an economic outlook for 6 months from now, based on economic data such as industrial activity, GDP and capital flows. A reading above 100 indicates economic expansion. The OECD average for April was 100.6. Korea's final figure of 101.01 places it 12th among OECD member nations.
And time now for a look through the international headlines we're following this hour. For that, we connect live to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center.
So Eunice, Sunni militants have made some serious headway now in Iraq and now capturing 3 border crossings on the western frontier.
That's right, Mark, and the border crossings line up with Syria and Jordan, which puts the ISIL militants steps closer to taking over the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. This is because they now have control of the Abu Kamal Qaim crossing, which also serves as a strategic supply route connecting to eastern Syria, largely already in the hands of ISIL militants who want to, of course, create an Islamic caliphate there. Also, insurgents firmed their grip over the region by taking 4 additional strategic towns, effectively controlling at least 70% of the Anbar province. And complicating the response to the tensions is Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who came out to strongly oppose U.S., quote, intervention in Iraq. He said the insurgency was led by extremists and remnants of Saddam Hussein's regime and rejected the notion that it was a sectarian war between Shiites and Sunnis. The impact of the leader's statements on a possible Tehran-Washington alliance to defend Baghdad remains to be seen. The United States has unlocked $575 million in military aid to Egypt days after the country's army chief Abdul Fattah al-Sisi was sworn in as president. The news came as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry was in Cairo to meet with al-Sisi, during which he stressed to the new head of state the importance of upholding the rights and freedoms of all citizens. Al-Sisi won the national polls on a platform of security, but has pursued a crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood, which boycotted the May elections. Kerry also pledged Washington would, quote, stand with the Egyptian people in their fight for the future they want. A humanitarian crisis could be looming in Pakistan as a full-scale army offensive is underway in the tribal region of North Waziristan. Some 350,000 people have been displaced in the past week as Pakistani forces strike Taliban and foreign militants hiding out in the mountainous region bordering Afghanistan. The raid comes in response to a deadly airport attack in Karachi earlier this month, which an Uzbek militant group said it was responsible for. Fleeing refugees told the BBC they were angry for the military's bombing of their homes. They also said a refugee camp in Banu lacked basic necessities like water, food, and sanitation. And finally, organizers say more than 500,000 people cast their votes over the weekend in Hong Kong's unofficial referendum. The big turnout represents roughly 10% of Hong Kong's population of 7 million. Voters cast their say in whether or not the city-state should have a democratic ballot law from Beijing. China has called the vote illegal. The organizers, Occupy Central, rejecting that label, extended the electronic polls by another week after the voting website was frozen due to an apparent cyber attack. They also opened 15 physical polling booths across Hong Kong on Sunday. The group is calling for genuine universal suffrage after China said the city-state can elect its top leader in 2017, but only from a pool of candidates pre-selected by a nominating committee.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju with Pro.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
The U.S. Food and Drug Association has given the green light to a Korean-made drug for the first time in 11 years. Cevextro, an antibiotic made to treat infections of the superbacteria known as MRSA, was developed by Korean pharmaceutical company Dongha ST. It marks the second locally developed drug to get the seal of approval from the U.S. agency. Dongha ST expects to pull in annual sales of about $293 million from licensing, royalties, and technology support from the U.S. producer and distributor of its drug. And on to some other sports news. Apart from the World Cup, Korean-American Michelle Wie has won the U.S. Women's Open, earning her first major championship title. Wie closed with an even par 70 at Pinehurst #2 on Sunday local time for a 278 total. This puts the 24-year-old 2 shots ahead of #1 ranked American Stacey Lewis. Wie turned pro in October 2005, and this marks her first win in a major tournament.
Now, Korea boasts rich cultural assets and traditions from its thousands-year-long history, with dozens of UNESCO-registered heritage sites and intangible assets. But now there's a special free tour program for all expats here in Korea that introduces them to UNESCO-listed World Heritage items right here in Korea. Our Park Ji-yeon reports.
This is Hwasong Fortress, located in Suwon, some 40 kilometers south of Seoul. The late 18th century defense fortress, representing an innovative military architecture of the Joseon dynasty, was registered on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1997. Dozens of expats are taking a stroll around the UNESCO site as part of one-day tour organized by Korea's Culture Ministry and the Korean Culture and Information Service.
I really love the way Korean present their culture and present their country. This program made me realize how rich the Korean culture is.
It is an excellent program. We are enjoying every bit of it. Wonderful people, and of course, Korea is a fascinating country.
The tour program invites Korea's international residents to explore UNESCO-listed World Heritages. The tours are free of charge for all foreigners living in Korea. Anyone who's interested in signing up can register online at www.heritageinkorea.kr. 6 more such programs will be provided throughout the year, each focusing on different UNESCO-registered Korean cultural assets, both tangible and intangible, such as the Korean martial art, taekyeon, and kimchi-making culture. Each of the tours will include a discussion and a lecture, and of course, a hands-on visit to heritage sites or the region of the intangible traditions. Park Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, in some science news, researchers right here in Korea have come up with a way to give robots the sense of touch using artificial skin. One of the good things about this is it would make it more suitable for physical human interaction. Our Son Jung-in reports.
A robot that can feel the sense of touch just like a human. It seems unrealistic, but but local researchers have come up with new technology that could equip robotic devices for the future. Korea's Electronics and Telecommunications Research Institute recently developed a transparent touch sensor sheet that perceives information from surroundings in real time, such as the amount of pressure, direction, and temperature of touch. Only 50 micrometers thick, it can be bent or rolled without affecting sensor signals it detects, even when force is applied to various spots at the same time, just like when shaking hands with someone.
Upon touch, light scatters on the spot and the panel detects the difference between the input light and the output light.
Thanks to its thin and flexible qualities, the panel is applicable on nearly any surface, which makes it ideal for a wide variety of future uses, most notably in the flexible display market.
This technology will enable us to maneuver robot hands in a very delicate way. It could also be applied to wearable devices for people to operate in an elaborate manner.
The result of its research has led to the filing of 8 related patents and was featured in the scientific journal Advanced Materials. 손정인, Arirang News.
And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Jinju and I will be back at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.